Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In order to move from the early concepts towards the new theory or the emerging theory of design thinking, we need to cross the Bandra C-link, which is the C-link of practitioners of the industry. And that's what we bring in today. What's the C-link like, and what's the drive like? Should you drive slow? Should you drive fast? And so on and so forth. So we are India incorporated into design thinking. Along with me is Ranjan, and I'll take the first half, a little more than that, and Ranjan will round it off. Okay, so goals of this study, we want to assess the extent of application of design thinking in Indian corporates. Second is, what are the early stages of emerging application of design thinking in the country? Third is, therefore, what is the road ahead for implementation of DT? And I'm going to use this DT acronym. It's a dipstick study. We anyway know it's a dipstick study. It talks about the surface tension of the dipstick, you know. It doesn't talk about what the crucible is like. So whatever is the surface tension, that small view of the dipstick is what we will take. Our intended sample size has been 100 corporates, quantitative survey, and senior industry leaders' reflections based on their innovation experiences is what we wanted to capture, and 20 in-depth interviews with CEOs, CXOs is what was the original plan. So the journey is on, the destination is still a little far away. So as of now, preliminary findings is 50% of this survey is complete. 52 senior leaders responded on innovations. 2/3 of these 52 have been CEOs, CXOs, and business heads. 19 plus years of experience, but what is more important is the average is 5.5 years of experience is these CEOs, CXOs has been in their last organization. So 5.5 out of 19, which means the rest 3/4, they have been moving across other organizations. So collectively, we have the wisdom of over 100 organizations, at least some of their LinkedIn profiles say that they have gone through around 120 such organizations. So that's what we have captured. Their profile is exposure to 100, I mentioned. We have actually done 12 in-depth CEO interviews, and that's where we are here for today. So where we stand. 37% of the organizations covered, they have no idea about design thinking. And the rest said, yes, we know about design thinking, we heard about it. Out of the rest, that's 33 of them, 12 of them, they said, we have attended design thinking courses, mostly abroad. So not much in India. Then, attended workshops. Organizations aware of DT, they seem to differ in terms of what they want to call about eclectic teams, and Ranjan mentioned about eclectic teams. And also, can we fail to succeed early? Is it a philosophy? Is this mindset applicable for us or not? Okay, this is a little complex slide, but I'll navigate you through as to what we have found out. We're on the first button. So we asked, is your organization is very highly innovative? So we find that we divided this group 52 into those who have not done DT and those who have heard or done DT. So those who have not done is 19 and those who have heard is 33. So it says your organization is, the pointer is not working? Okay, it's not visible, which is okay. So 37%, which is the second column of them said, yes, we think it is innovative. Your organization is innovative, whereas those who knew DT, they felt that 52% of them said, yes, our organization is innovative. So on the second bullet, what about the innovative practices in your industry? Has it been high or very, very high? Those who have not done design thinking, they said that 32% of them said, yes, there's a lot of innovation in our industry. Those who have done DT, there's the second last column, 52% of them have said, yes, it's very, very high in terms of innovative practices. The third line, in terms of formation of eclectic groups, does it happen a lot in your organization? Is it very high or very high? Once again, the answers are that on the second last column, 39% of those who have not done, those who have done design thinking, they said yes, eclectic groups are formed, but it's only 40%. The leader decides, there's an innovation team which comes on board, and so on and so forth, but it's really not cross-functional. It is really not covering the entire gamut of right to the junior most to the senior most. So it's around 40%, that's it. And lastly, the mindset of failing to succeed. So how is it? We found that 32%, overall 37% of those who we have surveyed, they said, yes, the mindset of failing to succeed is there. So that's how we have figured out. And what we find out across all these parameters, those who have been, having some exposure to design thinking, they realize that, well, the tenets of design thinking seems to have been internalized by them, seems to have been practiced by them, and that they believe that DT is a good way, a good method to work with. Okay, understanding of innovation. Ranjan did mention about this. Mature organizations' understanding of innovation should go beyond just the benefits. They should also go to execution, profits, and scalability. Next up, technology, novelty, and benefit still seems to dominate the understanding of innovation. And this primarily has been said by those who have undergone design thinking. That's the comment which they have made. Innovation, this is important. When we went up to these two groups, and then we asked them, what are the innovative practices, and why do you think something is innovative? These are the kind of answers they have got. They said they looked at enablers of innovation, they looked at the context of innovation, they looked at users of innovation. 45% of these surveyed, they said, well, innovation is driven by technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, so some said SaaS, programming, algorithm. 35% said the business is important, the business needs innovation. For instance, it is infrastructure, or maybe it is a health as a sector, or maybe some people said even eating out in restaurants, that's the context, there we need innovation. So it's the context. And around 20% of them said that, well, it's not the driver of the technology which will drive innovation, it's not the context, eventually it is the user. Finally, my penny stops with the user. I need to understand who this user is. When does he or she have a difference of opinion? Only 20%. Now this only 20%, I'm going to elaborate. We had two groups. One which did design thinking and one which did not design thinking. And now see the last bullet point, what it shows us. Out of these people who said that, users are important, those who did DT, 28% of them said user is very, very important. Whereas those who did not go through design thinking, they said, user, important, just about 5%. We're looking at the user is only about 5%, but technology is very important, the context is important. Users will anyway be the beneficiary of whatever we innovate and whatever we give it to them. Okay? Now, we asked these participants, respondents, name one innovative product, and we also asked them, give us 2 reasons why you think it's innovative. Okay. We again have these 2 categories. The first category, out of the 19, 7 of them said Uber, which is around 1/3. And the rest of them said, API and analytics and artificial intelligence, internet. Whereas the group which did design thinking, the 33 of them, look at the type of examples. Only 2 out of 33 used Uber as an innovative product or a service. The rest of them spoke of artificial intelligence. They spoke of digital signatures. Some spoke of digi-skin twin. I don't know if you know about that. So, in medical robotics, some part of your tissue or your skin is, is recreated. That's a digi-skin twin. So to figure out if a medicine or if anything is intervention process, is it working on you or not? So you are away from it, your skin twin, it will go through all of that, and then eventually the results will be put on you. People have spoken on Coke, the experience which happened, so Coke was done in such a way that the fizz was retained for over 6 months, whereas competitors had the fizz retained for only 2 months. This was through a silicon gas technology, that is the SGT. So people have spoken on plant performances, analytics, DIY, ATM. People have spoken of grocery interfaces and so on and so forth. So the variety of thinking, the breadth of thinking of those who have undergone these courses, these kind of training, appear to be much higher than the other segment. And eventually, of course, those who are familiar with it, we call it the user is the desirability, the feasibility is do we have the resources, and eventually the viability or the impact. So this was the distribution. 52% of them said that the user is important. 30% of them said that the feasibility, which is the resources and capability, is important. And only 18% of them said that, well, the impact, we will work out the impact at the later stage. Which DT elements have been seen as critical? User-centric inciting was critical. That's what they have mentioned. And I think I'll go into the next slide because it has the data on it. Yeah, so So if you notice, so there's a home furnishing, ITES, services, banking and finance, FMCG. So the organizations were asked to rank them. 1 is the best, most preferred, and 7 is the least. And we found that user-centric insighting was high on their agenda, so the lower scores are better ones, on an average of 1.2, followed by, say, the cross-functional eclectic teams was the second, and rapid prototyping was the third, and reframing. What is this reframing? Once you have a product or a service which is at a reasonable stage of go to your user for a feedback, if at the last moment you get some kind of an insight, something deep, are you able to stop things on the track and then rework the whole process and then go for it? So we call it looking at using a different kind of a lens, even if it is at the last moment. Do you recognize this? Do you respect it? So that was the last. So the reframing based on a new insight appeared to be the last in terms of the preferences. So that's it. Okay, application areas. Leading application areas, including new product development and customer experience, would be important. That's what the feeling about. We also realized that a very significant difference in terms of the industry perspectives across. I just showed you 5 or 6 different industries. The perspectives of innovation was very, very different. While this is so, design thinking actually has a very set kind of a process. Design thinking is agnostic, it is sector agnostic, it is organization agnostic, it is area agnostic. It has a specific process. Whether you are designing a toothbrush, or an aeroplane or some kind of a service, the process is pretty well set out. So whereas the approach, the responses did not show this kind of a confirmation in terms of using one unique process. So they thought that depending on my industry, my innovation chapter, my innovation channel, my innovation resources, and my, all of that will be very, very different and very, very unique. Well, DT doesn't recognize that. Also, issues like change management, which is very, very important, where with the goals, we don't know the goals of employees, of partners, we don't know the objectives, we don't know the constraints, where things are very fuzzy. That's where change management needs a lot of design thinking, but this is unexplored. Okay, look at this slide. I still have 13 minutes to go, which also takes Ranjan's time. So the ones are highlighted, for instance, new product service. The service industry thought that we should dwell on service. That's our biggest agenda into innovation. The FMCG, I'm in the second last column, they said that human resources going ahead. A CEO of this company said that, well, going ahead, I think we need to look a lot of human resources, and if DT can work in this, it's fuzzy, it's unknown, there are complexities, we'll work on that. Customer experience was this home furnishing company said, customer experience to me is most important, I'm going to apply it over there, and so on. So process redesign was ITES too. They felt that we are going to use this for process. That's our biggest agenda for innovation. Banks again went to human resources going ahead. That's where a lot of complexity is happening, turnover and all of that. But what we realize is change management, which is put in red, is the lowest in the agenda these are all about CEO responses. Change management is the lowest in terms of the agenda of looking at innovative practices, which is why I put that in red. So overall, hype is, I think, yeah, this is from where Ranjan, I think you will take over because the last slide says over to Ranjan. Sorry. Yeah.
So the over to Ranjan is a small design modification, because we know that faculty, once they get in front of a classroom, you're all a classroom to us, we like to speak. Yeah, the clicker. Okay, so I will hand you over to Suranjan, but again for of the last word. But overall, everybody is talking about it. The depth of what we've done is far lower than the hype. So the hype is far greater than the substance. Some of the early adopters are companies like IBM, companies like Infosys. So the technology sector, and particularly the software sector, seems to have been one of the sectors which has moved further. In many of the conventional companies, it is the marketing and service-related applications, which is good and bad. It's good in a sense that these are seeing applications and these are seeing benefit. But it has then relegated design thinking to certain domains within the organization and is therefore not really an organization-wide initiative, and therefore you're not getting full of the potential. Complex cross-silo applications are still nascent, and normally this is a signal that is the CEO level sponsorship enough. Because when you have a complex cross-silo application, you typically need a champion at the top to really cut across the silos. There are many companies which claim they are doing design thinking, and if you actually ask them what it is, you realize that they are doing whatever they were doing before. They are now calling it design thinking. The highest level of application is the mindset of fail fast to succeed early. And when you get to that mindset, you're really talking about culture change. We have a speaker at the end of the day who's going to talk about mindset. So this is a level we've not reached now. We sought to seek some inspiration. So Jim Collins had come up some time back, and I'm just going to show you all 5 slides, all the 5 levels. Had come up with this 5 levels of leadership. So we've come up with this 5 levels of design thinking, and we haven't, there is a company that we know for each of these. When we get to the higher levels, we will name the company. When we get to the lower levels, the company shall remain incognito for the sake of relationships and goodwill. A group, at the first level, there is somebody who reads about design thinking, likes the idea, forms a group, trains a group, does a pilot project. That's often a very good place to start, because you have an empowered employee at the middle level and he does something. Now, if this person is reasonably influential in the company, then you get to the next stage where you say, here is an SBU or here is a department. We will set up a process, and very critical, what we found in India, it is that the inciting process is the most critical element of the design thinking process. It is not the ideation, it is not the creative leap, it is getting the problem right. So setting up an inciting process and identifying an SBU or department which will focus. And again, often this is not a bad place to start at all, because it gets you tangible, measurable proof of concept in the organization. The next level is enable. That once you have seen some results, if senior management is not already on board, senior management needs to get trained. And my learning, where senior management says we'll get exposed for 1 hour, it does not work. You cannot do a 1-hour capsule for senior management and proceed this. You need to train them. They need to get their hands dirty. They need to play with prototypes. If a company is asking you to do this without doing that 2-day or 3-day intensive for senior management, and if you're serious about helping the company and not just getting some business refuse, empanel and train internal facilitators. Beyond a certain level of scale, it is the internals who need to carry it forward, move to more complex across silo applications. You need senior management on board, because otherwise politics will stymie this. There are many companies, I can think of the Aditya Birla Group, I can think of Mahindra & Mahindra. They are doing a lot of this. There are applications in HR, there are applications in change management, there are applications in product design. So a lot of this has begun to happen. Godrej is another company that has moved significantly. At level 4, the CEO gets involved and starts becoming a champion. And at this stage, you have to say, where does design thinking fit in my company's innovation process? Because a company typically has a process for incremental innovation and a process for radical innovation. A lot of radical innovation is often technology-driven, and you need to figure out if the innovation idea is coming from technology, where does the user come in there? A lot of incremental innovation has to come from the whole organization, and then you need to figure out how does incremental innovation get filtered. So putting this in, and this is the stage where we move to an execution mode where you ideally need something like a 3-year pipeline. What is your year 1? What is your year 2? What is your year 3? Again, once companies have got the buy-in, they're pretty good at this. The final stage, and in a structured fashion, I don't think we've seen this in any Indian company. The final stage is when there is a mindset of experimentation across the organization. There are companies like Pidilite, which is represented here, where I think this mindset of experimentation has historically been there. So, in terms of working with carpenters to create products, getting them to iterate, but they may need to go back to level 3 and again come back to level 5, because that's when you kind of processize it and build it. So, this is our point of view. It is based on the companies we have seen. We don't have a large enough sample size, and one of the things that Suranjan and I are very excited along with the entire DT team is we want to go out to 300 companies and figure out where companies are. Okay, and if you want to build on this, how do you move from stages? So from initiate to deep dive, you need to set up an inciting process, identify a focus department or champion for an early pilot. For deep dive to enable, you need to train senior management and look at your innovation process. For enable to activate, you need ownership at the CEO level, you need to look at modifying the innovation process, and you need to know where not to apply design thinking. And I think that clarity of where you apply it and where you don't apply it. And finally, to move to the mindset level, you need culture change and it needs to go down. And this then becomes an organizational-wide thing. It needs to get integrated into values and behaviors. And finally, we have 4 minutes, Suranjan. For the last piece of storytelling, I hand you back some SPJIMR experience of design thinking outside the corporate sector.
Okay, back on stage. So it's time for a few anecdotes, and I think anecdotes might be interesting. For example, before I get into our experiences, for 4.5 minutes, all right, fruits and vegetables, you know. So a certain major who supplies fruits and vegetables to you realized that quality control is extremely important, and they've done everything in the chain, and later on realized that it's more important to figure out if you're getting the right fruit or not. So I can't just bounce off 3 of my suppliers if they've supplied it poorly. So what they did is they first figured out, would a scan work well to figure out if the inside of the fruit is damaged or is becoming black or turning sour or not. After going through a certain round of experiments, they realized that, hey, it's not working. There's something else is important which figures out how other people decide. How other people decide how a fruit is fresh is very different from how I decide. So where did they go? They went to the airports, the airport scanners. They customized the airport scanners, which was very different from the scanners which are there in hospitals and other places, to figure out how the fruit has to be assessed. Rugs, bath rugs. What about bath rugs? You may think of so many things about how a bath rug is used, but then someone else figured out that, well, can I cut a bath rug into 4 pieces where the children, when they come to play, or the 2 of my kids, and when the other kids come over, they can take away the 4 disintegrated pieces to different parts. 1-2 people go into the garden, and 2 smaller kids play here, so they will have different kind of a feature. Later at night, I'm going to zip them up together. It becomes 1 bath rug. So there's something deep over there. Third, printers. We all know that, when we use a printer, what do? The printer is over there and the paper moves. Why not reverse it? And there wouldn't be a time, and not very long, not too long further away, we may find all our printers is probably useless. We'll have a printer in our pockets. So the paper will be stationary and the printer is going to move. And there are many such. Wedding cards. I think half the people in this audience would have gone through wedding cards, and the other half, my students are there, they would need to make their wedding cards. What about wedding cards is important? So there's a certain company which is creating a printer only for printing wedding cards, and they're very, very expensive ones, So if you sell around 40 of them, you're making 100 crores. That's the kind of cost. So then they realize that, well, the person who is in charge of making a printer can jolly well be a part of the entire process of organizing a wedding, be a part of the family, instead of being someone aloof and just gives a printed card to you and that's gone, done and dusted. You don't even know him or her. At max, you're going to invite that person. Suddenly, this person is a part of the room, and it's a completely different story. So these are examples. Let's see what we have over here. I can see a little blink over there. Mary, this lady was unwell. Mary has been unwell. Mary is a mother of 2 children. Ratika will give me a couple of minutes more. Yeah, so mother of 2 children, and then, so that's Mary over there. She went to a diagnostic center. She has been going to the hospital for a long period of time, but of late, she has not been receiving the calls. The health center was sending her calls, say, please come over, please come over. Mary was on the brink. She was attending to her 2 children, plus her brother who works in the fields, and his wife who works domestic help somewhere, leaves their 2 kids along with Mary. So this was in return for maybe a financial help given much earlier. So for going to the hospital, these are her responsibilities. So let's see what happened. Eventually, Mary was on the brink. So the hospital had everything done to take care of Mary. They called her up over a repeated period. Hospital was also a very patronized place. A lot of patients used to go there, and Mary used to go there before as well. But then Mary has a large family, and then who will look after these kids when Mary goes over to the hospital? No one knew about it. But eventually what was needed is that instead of Mary going over to the hospital, somewhere or a quasi-service between the hospital and the Mary should have gone to Mary's place. And then let's see what happens. The Mary's journey is like this. 3.6 million patients miss their hospital appointments per year. This is an HBR study, August 2017. That's the kind of numbers, and this leads to disasters. I told you, reaching the health center was a big problem for her. And once she's inside the health center, it's a large health center, it was very difficult for her to figure out how to navigate. Where is the department? Where do I take the medicine? Where do I get the kids? How do I come back home to those 2 kids or 4 kids, and so on and so forth? And taking that forward, we realized the insight about Mary and her life and her problems and her journey was very, very important, much more important than what hospital was offering. And if you had known this insight, if you had recognized this insight, this right insight could have saved her life. So what our students did in the program in design thinking, this is what they did. They created an access card. So the access card had, 4 panels. The first panel had Mary's context. You see the full family, all the kids are there. The second one is how Mary travels. So if she's traveling in a bullock cart or something, or if she's using a bus, so that is also given over there. Then the third one is the layout of the hospital, so how Mary should navigate once she's inside the premises, and finally Mary's name, and that's her card. So whenever there's a telecalling coming from the hospital, you actually know the context this woman is facing and the environment around her. So that's the story. And I think going, because of time, sorry, I'll not show you the next one, but we are done with it. So thank you very much. And credits for all of this is to my research associate, Binita Salian. She's over there. A lot of this research and background, thanks to her as a contribution. So we are happy to take questions. Ranjan, if you would kindly come up on stage. Yeah.
We will only take questions. We will not take elaborate comments. Any question has to be asked in 20 words or less. This is learning from past experience and user insights. So 1 or 2 questions maybe we can take, and I know everybody is waiting for Srikanth. So any questions? No questions, either very bad or very good. So anybody? Any questions on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we get a mic over there?
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for the innovative session. My question to you is such a wonderful tool which is immensely beneficial to everybody. Is it that, sir, an individual with a highly intelligence can only be used by design thinking, that he will get up in the morning and start doing innovation, or it can be used by anybody for their benefit, irrespective of the landscape or corporate or anything in the ecosystem, sir?
So if I rephrase the question, is design thinking for anybody and everybody, or is design thinking only for large corporates or large institutions or things like that? I think the simple way to look at this is that design thinking is appropriate for a certain category of problem. And if you appreciate that it starts with the problem, then it can be used in a variety of contexts. So for instance, how would you design your career? It's a design thinking problem. The problem is, in some of these cases, the context of a prototype may be a little bit more difficult to examine, but you could still write down a map of your career. But the point is, you could insight for your career, because there would be multiple people. I mean, you could ask your boss, you could ask people you worked with, you could ask your family members. So yes, wherever there is an unstructured problem with multiple stakeholders with different perspectives, this approach has potential, number one. Number two, I think if you accept that the most critical part of design thinking is inciting, then it is highly teachable. The third is, this is something we normally like to do, so maybe I'll just do it. How many of you in this audience think you're creative? Okay, we can't have half hands. This is either all the way up. Okay. So not bad, not bad. So that's the audience is around 20% creative. How many of you know a 6-year-old child who is not creative? There's not a hand up. So the point is, creativity is not an innate human trait. It is something that society, and I hate to say it, the education system, has socialized out of us. So the point is, I think if you break the script around creativity, if you look at inciting as central, then it is applicable to everybody, however, it is not applicable to every problem. And I think that's where one needs to be careful. Okay? I think we move forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee and Dr. Das. We can hear a slightly louder applause, can't we? Thank you.